Hello, and welcome to the Branching PathCast, Episode 2. I'm Marley, and I'm going to discuss preparation regarding the creation of branching narratives of storytelling. This can be applied to creation more generally, but I'm going to tie things back to complex narrative structures. I hope that you find this helpful, and if you want to reach out with feedback, are interested in collaborating, or just want more content, please check out branchingpath.com. Let's dig into today's topic. So, there are many different ways that you can prepare for the creation of a project, and it varies widely from the kind of project and also the preference of the person. It took me quite a while when I was trying to start things. I found myself seeking information and gathering from many sources. That's kind of the ubiquitous problem today, that there are so many choices and so many ways to do things, and it is easy to be overwhelmed. I know that I felt it was beneficial to take parts that I felt would resonate with me, but trying to follow all the rule sets really caused a lot of focus to be taken away from the process and made it a lot more difficult to juggle things. For instance, when I was learning how to write movie scripts, I read many books and I bought a few internet classes in order to get various perspectives. And there were many really useful techniques that I felt was going to be the next thing to break through my barrier and drive me towards success. There are so many sources telling people how to do things. This is the one way that you will succeed, or just do these 5 things and you can't fail. I appreciate the irony in me advising this, but don't follow other people's advice. The creative process is individual, and many people are going to struggle with any given process. That being said, it's not a bad idea to gather different perspectives and methods, but they are useful to gather knowledge from and not necessarily to follow precisely. So, I'd like to talk more about the actual processes that I've found useful in the short term, and also in the long term. I've worked on developing Android applications, website design, music, and poetry, lots of different things. And when I have had limited success, it has been due to a lack of overarching design, lack of preparation. And I've also failed because I've prepared far too much. If you find yourself listening to other people, reading their books, and that kind of thing, and it feels like you're progressing that way, I would caution you to reflect on if that is moving you forward towards your goal. I know that I leaned on information gathering as a source of felt progress, but really I was avoiding the creation process because I wasn't comfortable with the idea of judgment or failure. And it was only really when I started actively participating in the process that I was able to make progress. I know that people seem to put themselves into 2 camps, either pantsers or planners. Whenever there are categories, it's useful, and of course to a degree, that is necessary. But especially with 2 options, that is a red flag, and likely a false dichotomy. Labels are pretty powerful, and I would be careful in pledging allegiance to a label. If you were going to align with something like that, it's setting up expectations for yourself, laying out boundaries, which implicitly have win conditions and lose conditions. Things aren't always going to have the same amount of preparation necessary. When I was creating my first screenplay, after I had procrastinated for a long time, reading too many books and such, I found one book that I felt resonated, and I stuck with that one method, and let go of the rest. The book was How to Write a Movie in 21 Days by Vicky King. I would highly recommend it, especially for people who are into NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. It just lays things out in a way that really makes sense, and I won't summarize it here, because it has a lot of specific information about producing a fleshed out screenplay over a month. But this method of doing things isn't really effective for me in the long term. However, I did get my first draft out of it, and I took away some information from it that has informed my current process. So please feel free to experiment. It's important to try things out, and not too many things at once. But don't let yourself become too rigid. It's about giving yourself the freedom to experiment and to be fluid in how you approach things, then iterate. If it feels like you have failed, then that is framing things as a false dichotomy, and you may be better served in approaching it as a learning process or experience. A book I recently started reading, Unstoppable Brain by Kyra Bobinet, has some interesting things to say on the subject. So I have set up ways of working that over time have become less rigid. I was really excited when I began writing for NaNoWriMo, which is writing 1,667 words a day for a whole month, usually November. And I managed to write for a whole month, meeting my goals. It was difficult sometimes, but I've won twice in a row now. It is really fulfilling, and so I thought I had my solution. I had written that many words every day on a project, which I had roughly outlined. My outline consisted of fleshing out main characters, basically what they wanted, what they actually need, maybe some defining characteristics, a flaw, and some secrets. Pretty bare bones. Then, for some of the characters, I like to write in sprints. Just put on some ambient music and write in first person as themselves, expressing what they are all about in their own words. Once that is done, the last part of preparation is to develop things, like the theme in the logline, if they are not already formed, and then plot a backbone of story beats that are roughly equal parts. Here, people tend to align with something like the 3-act structure, and you'll probably be fine as long as you have some structural idea. There are quite a few. But that is the preparation phase, and I know people will vary on how they like to do it. I've heard some people develop mood boards, or they make playlists that are relevant to the feel of their story. There is no wrong way to do it. As long as you get yourself writing, you are probably moving in the right direction. So my experience in projects up to participating in Nano and following it, I would give myself really high bars to meet. At the time, I was working full-time, and I had many other obligations. And there were several problems with my method that I recognized were patterns in how I approach things. First, the idea of keeping a streak alive was my motivator, and I was focused on the conclusion. It is easy to destroy your morale when you are too rigidly grasping the streak continuation, or you are more focused on the outcome, because breaking the streak is basically guaranteed. This is also opening up your process to be rigid and vulnerable to external things outside of your control. It's funny, but when I was dedicated to 1,667 words a day, it was really difficult to reach that goal. When I later adopted 444 words a day through a useful site, forthewords.com, which I recommend trying, it was so much easier, and I found that I generally wrote much more than without the pressure of meeting the higher word count every day. And then there are streak break items, which allow you to preserve over a holiday or a missed day. And I feel like having the option to give yourself that kind of compassion and leniency is really helpful. So writing between loosely established goalposts and segments is really helpful for me to keep going. This is useful in plotting story structure or even getting some kind of a design outline together in my mind. I usually don't have an extremely clear picture of what the end will look like, and I would recommend you become comfortable with writing under similar circumstances. Likely as you write or design, things will develop differently. If you have a really specific outline, you are either locking yourself down, or you are worrying more about changing things going forward. Giving yourself permission to be creative and make mistakes is also important in writing, especially drafts and exploratory work. Giving the critical side of yourself separate space lets the creative side write unencumbered and gives freedom for exploration that may yield unexpected things. I believe this was also talked about in How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. And at this last point, I unfortunately don't remember where I read this information, but it has been really helpful. It's the idea that you should think at the speed you write or type. So your mind can race along much faster than you are able to transmit information and externalize it. And being careful of synchronizing your thought process with your writing speed is extremely helpful. It sounds kind of strange, but I feel that this has been really impactful on my ability to write. The designing of highly branching narratives, and of games that allow for a significant amount of freedom, and thus an increasing amount of variables during a given event, can lead to overwhelm and burnout without a way to manage and navigate the task of tackling these kinds of problems. The more ability for players to do things as they please, and be free from a linear or modular narrative space, the increasing amount of things that may be necessary to track and check against. There are many ways to go about tracking and accounting for these things. There could be tables used that track planting and payoff of choices. However, the continual updating of such a table may become cumbersome and detract from the flow of design and writing. A nice alternative to such things is using comments or tags to flag lines as you go. This way you can search and find things easily again throughout the development process, and easily gain all of the instances in their context. Committing to and tagging things early on and throughout the process consistently can provide many benefits, from the smooth tracking of things, planned achievements, the demarcation of moments is significant, and audio and visual cues that can be later used to translate into appropriate assets. Inky by Inkle is great for this, as the system is built to track branches that dead end, and it is also aimed to be more like writing naturally, so the cumbersome aspects of many other branching narrative software are not seen here. After a bit of a learning curve, it is extremely powerful and makes for productive use. It is made to slot into Unity. However, there is also an export function that allows for easy embedding of the narrative work onto a website. In the tracking of quests and game states, there are many ways to handle this in Inky specifically, but these things can be implemented in any language you are using. Inky is just made to track and evaluate conditionals and points that have previously been visited, so there's a reduction in the amount of variables that you may have to worry about managing yourself. A representative from Inkle gave a talk that I found was very interesting, and I'd like to share briefly their approach. I will link the video down in the description, but I would like to outline what they talked about and shared here because I feel it is so helpful. The tracking of conditions in the world are easy to compare, and different types of things can have different states tracked. There is also an easy way to track the progression of tasks in a manner Inkle visualizes as separate graduated cylinders, which together make up the current progress of different things. In tracking information in this way, it allows for more flexibility in branching narrative, and it can more easily respond to instances such as the primary quest giver is killed. Then it doesn't necessarily mean that there is no other way to access that information. It's really easy to transmit that task onto another party. Or if you're slowly disseminating information throughout a town, you know exactly what has already been heard, and you can have different people who haven't been talked to slowly dispense things that are breadcrumbing towards the main reveal of the town, for instance. And those are just examples that they gave in the talk. Once again, I would really recommend you check it out. But I just wanted to share like a snippet of it because I feel this is a really great way to go about laying out a complicated narrative or RPG design and could shake up things relative to how it is usually presented. I love the approach that Inkle takes toward the management and design of complex story. It allows for a good mixture of planning and creativity. There are other solutions that may be of use, as the popular RenPy, which I believe is similar insofar as you are writing things out. Then there is software like Twine and ChatMapper that are more modular experiences, where you are more readily able to visualize your choices. And it seems like some may prefer to have that easily digestible way of seeing the story progress. But I've been happy to sacrifice that for the ease of use and flow offered by using more programmatic approaches. Whatever you enjoy using and will use continually is the best for you, and it may depend on a given topic or project. I've always been curious about the in-house software of supermassive games. I have attempted their method before, as outlined in an article that I will link in the description below if you are interested. I guess their process is generally to write a solid movie script, and then once they have perfected it, go along and branch off at interesting points, continually elaborating alternate pathways. There is a visualization that you can find based on their in-house software that is staggering, and I love to see these kinds of graphical depictions to appreciate the complexity of things. But I also feel personally that I would not want to deal with the generation of my story that way, seeing the large interconnecting nodes, but I'm sure that some people would gain benefit in having that readily available, and working with many people, it may be more fruitful in that sense. As I have currently only worked alone on similar projects like that, and the scope has not been as large, I may change my tune in different circumstance. I know that this was kind of rambling. I suppose that my podcasts may be more likely to weave around, but I think that's kind of the charm of podcasts. They are not so curated, and as well as conveying information, they are also about hearing thought processes. Anyway, I hope that this was helpful, and that there are some things you can take away from this. I'm so grateful that you have listened to this. It's scary to put something out like this. Probably a great bookend habit expressing my fear. Anyway, I'm Marley, and this is the Branching PathCast. Please subscribe to receive notifications to stay up to date, and visit branchingpath.com for information on how to contact me with thoughts, or if you'd like to collaborate. Check a link in the description as a secondary way to convey information to me. Please take care.